Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Russo. Thank you for joining me to discuss emotional intelligence. This presentation typically ranges between 3 and 4 hours. We are only spending 1 hour together on this today. I think there will be enough useful information for you in that 1 hour to use both at work as well as at home. So the agenda includes taking a look at emotion. How do we use it? Then exploring emotional intelligence. What is it? What are my strengths and opportunities? What are all of our strengths and opportunities? How does it impact performance as well as relationships? So that's the work and the personal element together that we see through our use of emotional intelligence skills, methods to improve them, and then some additional things we may not always take into consideration when we explore this topic. So let's start out by thinking about some different professions. So thinking about judges, doctors, salespeople, IT. Each of these roles are filled by individuals who may or may not display particular types of emotions. A lot of times we think about our doctors, and this is a very delicate balance for them between coming across as compassionate and caring versus alarming or lacking bedside manner. So I would say that's definitely a position, a profession where a tremendous amount of emotion may be experienced and a lot of challenges in how to channel it or display it. Salespeople in general, we think of as being very extroverted, very friendly, very outgoing. Perhaps they tip the scales a little bit too much. They may turn people off, or they're not outgoing or engaging enough and they're missing opportunities. IT folks, mail carriers, we tend to think as a little bit more independent from others, a little less engaging. But again, these are just ideas that we have in our mind. We've got some examples where certainly there are people in roles that are a lot more outgoing or the opposite, a lot less outgoing than we would anticipate them to be. But in general, looking at a particular job title does tend to make us kind of create a mental picture of the role, the person, and when we think of the person, we think of the personality and their use of emotional skills. So one thing that's interesting about emotions is that they are contagious. So you see the angry looking face on the left, and you might think of some times you've heard someone say, "Oh, that individual's toxic," or "I can't have toxic people in my life," or any kind of reference to a negative person, a negative experience that we want to minimize or eliminate. Why is that? Why do we want to minimize or eliminate those influences? And typically what we hear is because they bring me down. We want to remove that negativity because it brings me down. So that's an example of how emotions can be contagious. What we want is the positive, contagious energy where we're feeling good, we're feeling creative. There's a lot of science around why those positive feelings are valuable, and we will touch on that science today. But in general, when we think about it for a minute, we can definitely recall a time where we've either wanted to minimize interaction with particular personalities or increase interaction with more positive types of personalities. So when we really think about it, we can see how we've experienced that type of emotional contagion. And a good self-check to do is to be mindful of being exuding that positive type of emotion, that positive contagious energy. So I don't want to give the wrong idea in letting you think that we're trying to eliminate or reduce negative emotions entirely. We're not. That's not what this is about. We will actually talk about the benefit of negative emotions as well. But in general, environments that are lacking emotion are not enjoyable. They're boring, right? If we're not laughing, if we're not engaging, if we're not somehow enjoying ourselves, so enjoyment, there's a positive emotion. If we aren't having those feelings, those experiences, we're bored, we're not enjoying ourselves. So we don't want to remove and eliminate emotion. That's not what this is about. And we will talk about leveraging our own emotions into relationship management. We do that through our social skills. So we don't want to ignore those social skills. If we are ignoring that, if we are removing all of the emotion from the situation, we're not able to motivate people. We're not able to embrace differences. We will experience a lot of disappointment, and it'll be difficult to manage the people who are positive because they're not going to want to engage with us. They're bored. So, what is emotional intelligence? I'm sure by now those who are familiar with emotional intelligence are familiar with Daniel Goleman. He's written several fantastic books on the topic, and he defines it for us as the capacity for recognizing our own feelings, those of others, for motivating ourselves, and for managing emotions well in our relation in ourselves and in our relationships. So when we pull that apart, what we can see is that it's almost like there's two aspects of the emotional intelligence. There's me, and then there's others. And then within those two aspects are two more elements. So there's self-awareness, there's also self-management. So we may have in the past either heard someone say, or we may have said ourselves, oh, that only happened because I was so angry or so frustrated. So we can pick up on the self awareness, the recognition of anger or frustration, but it sounds like there was not a whole lot of self management, which led to something negative happening. So there's two pieces there, there's the self awareness and there's the self management. Moving over to our audience or others, it's the social awareness, reading the vibes of others. So, reading, understanding the mood of the audience, and then doing something about it. So, that piece is the relationship management. Really, the relationship management includes all of this, the self awareness, the self management, social awareness. Then we take all those pieces and we're able to more effectively manage our relationships. So, again, I did mention that this topic is not about removing the negative emotions. There's a lot of value to negative emotions when they're channeled properly. The problem is that sometimes they aren't channeled properly. So I'll give you an example. If we hear a fire alarm, we know to exit. We're not going to stop. We're not going to have a meeting. We're not going to request a conference room so that we can discuss whether or not we should leave the building. We know to leave the building. We may feel anxious. We may feel afraid. These are uncomfortable feelings, but they're useful feelings. They are protecting us. So what we want is to give an analogy, to exit the building when that's in our best interest and not have that type of reaction happen when it's not called for. So we do want to be able to embrace difficult feelings if they are helping us, but minimize them if they are not. And we'll explore this more as well. So focusing now on the self-awareness piece. So that was the first element. That's about being aware of the emotions and taking it a little bit further, knowing strengths and weaknesses, self worth and capabilities. A big piece of this is being receptive to feedback and continuous improvement. So it's great to hear positive feedback, right? We like that. It's harder to hear constructive feedback. But if we're able to do that and absorb it and improve from it, that's really very valuable for us. Also, being mindful of our own reactions to certain things, our own negative reaction to certain things, exploring how to recognize that and being able to plan for it in advance, but ultimately remaining optimistic and self motivated. This is a great place to be with self awareness. So, now the self management piece. Controlling the emotions, behaving with integrity, being flexible. We don't always like change, right? But sometimes change is good. So we do want to be flexible. We want to strive to improve, have that optimism around it, be open to new perspectives, the things that we may not have realized on our own. So those are the two elements for the self. Now we're going to switch over to the audience or social awareness. So now we're looking at really getting a strong vibe, an accurate vibe for what's going on with others around us, taking an active interest in them, anticipating and recognizing the needs. So as an instructor, now I can't see you, but I'm sure you're there. When I used to do this on site in groups, I would try to be very mindful of my audience. And if I could sense that I was losing them, and that's kind of easy to see when you're face to face, if people are looking at phones or looking away or looking down, I would know to pivot. Maybe it would be time for an activity or a break or dialogue with the group. That's that social awareness and then doing something about it. And we'll talk more about challenges in the virtual world. There's a lot less physical interaction now than there has been in the past. So we'll talk more about that and how to overcome those challenges. But in general, the social awareness is reading the vibe. So now the relationship management is taking these pieces, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and doing something about it. So sensing the development needs in others, being inspirational, that's really important for being motivational, that inspiring vision, being able to share a very inspiring vision motivates other people. Influence, persuasion, managing conflict, working within a group to achieve a mutual goal. All of these are the pieces around relationship management. And a lot of this is what enables us to have successes, accomplishments, get things done. So you can see the benefit to the skills in these four areas of emotional intelligence, the benefit for workplace success, personal relationship success, how to get things done, how to maintain positive motivation, be on the same page. So now that we've explored the four areas of emotional intelligence, we'll talk about some methods to make things happen by using different skills. So the emotional skills, what skills do we have in our toolkit for moving the needle? We could use humor, persuasion and influence. These persuasion and influence are really what you need for selling and negotiation. And if you think about the course of your day-to-day life, you may not necessarily be selling a product or negotiating a contract, but really any exchange of anything with another person does involve influence and persuasion. So you don't have to be signing a contract to be negotiating something, right? If you're exchanging something with someone else, if you need someone else to do something for you, if they're asking you for a favor, persuasion and influence are all in there. We help accomplish things through our relatability, our flexibility, our receptiveness to feedback. So these are all different emotional skills that if done right, we find that we do have more successful relationships, again, at work and at home. I mentioned earlier, there's a lot more virtual interaction now than there has been in the past. So what are we missing with that? What are we missing from those face-to-face interactions? If we're texting or emailing, or maybe you're still writing letters, we're missing the nuance of tone. If we're not on camera, we're missing facial expressions, we're missing body language. All of these elements send a message separate and apart from the words that come out of someone's mouth. So when we can observe these things, nuance and tone, facial expression, body language, we're able to absorb and interpret a message differently than we can when these are missing. So something I tell people when they're writing a business message is that you need to be mindful that that will be read and received based on the mood of the receiver. So if they are in a negative mood, they're going to read what you wrote negatively. If they're in a positive mood, they're going to interpret it more positively. So this puts the sender at a huge disadvantage So whenever possible, we do want to leverage some kind of camera or verbal kind of communication over electronic. So this was a very quick exploration into emotional intelligence. Again, I mentioned that this program typically goes between 2 and 3 hours. I do customize them according to company needs. If there are any particular items that you think warrant further exploration, I can definitely do that. This is part of a larger series, so focusing on topics like employee engagement, conversational intelligence. So we leverage everything we talked about today into how to make those conversations happen, facilitation, things like that. There are other programs on building and leading high performing teams, principles of good leadership. There is also a program on time management. So, not just what we think of as the 7 habits of highly effective people, but in a more modern world, the work life blending. We used to think of balance. I had work over here and I had home over there, and now it's all blended. So, different time management techniques, taking that all into consideration. So, please feel free to reach out for additional training.